Hi folks, welcome to IMB Magazine. My name is Clive from MTB Skills and you're joining us for the Skills and Technique feature. Each issue we're going to be looking at different techniques and the core skills to riding mountain bikes. So sit back and relax and enjoy. Hi folks, welcome back to another issue of our Skills and Technique feature. This time round we're going to be cranking it up and looking at the all-important thing of footwork, and in particular our crank position and what we're doing with our cranks. So obviously they're a real key fundamental part of riding the bicycle. They propel us forward, get us along the trail, get us up the hills, but we've got to do something with them when we're descending. What position do they go in? People talk about pedals level. Actually, your cranks are not quite level when you're in that position on the bike. People talk about dropped heel. It's true, but not strictly true everywhere on the trail. So we're going to look at that and get into a bit more detail during this up and coming feature. Alrighty, so what do we mean when we talk cranks level when we're descending? And what was I referring to in our intro? About they're not actually quite level. If we run crank level, it's very easy to become unbalanced between the two, not distributing your body weight evenly between them. Cranks level looks something like that. And in actual fact, you'll find when you watch the footage and watch slow-mos, we're more in that type of position. And I've heard it phrased from other parts of the world as putting you in kind of a wedge position. Think about the mechanics of walking and how we walk. We'll end up with one foot coming in onto the heel and the other foot's coming up off of the toe. The other way to think of it is if you were climbing up a crack, kind of crag climbing, and you're going up a crack or a gap, how you'd wedge yourself in that shape, pushing back against the rock face and pushing your toe against the other side of the rock face and shimmying your way up. It's kind of a wedge shape. And when we do that, to stay centered on the bike, keeping our hips above the bottom bracket, working in that kind of pocketed area in the middle of the bike, the cranks end up being not quite level. If I was leading right foot, they're going to look somewhere about there. Level cranking is often a cause for people to get pushed into the front center of the bike. They impact on things, pressure goes through that lead foot, it drives the crank round ever so slightly on the downstroke, and then the whole body's weight kind of like presses into the knee and the mass moves forward into the front center of the bike, and it's kind of an unsavory place to be. So don't think cranks level, don't think pedals level, but just think about your natural stance as if you were walking along, and think about adopting like a wedge type shape when you're descending. So that covers kind of the coasting down things. There are times in the extreme, if you watch World Cup downhill footage, where we do drop both heels, not just the heel of the lead foot, but we're cowered in the back of the bike more in very steep gradients, so we're trying to stay low and we're working really against the forces of braking. But with all of these positions, all of these points that you'll read about, you'll hear about, they're not a fixed thing. There's like everything on the bike is really dynamic. It's always changing. So that kind of adoptive, and again, millions of names for it, ready position, attack position, neutral stance, whatever we want to call it. That adopted stance isn't a static thing. Don't let your brain hold on to that and think I must be in that position. The bike's moving like this, it's moving below you, therefore the cranks are moving, pedals are moving, it's always changing, but we don't want to get out of range. That's the key thing. If we get out of range, we become unbalanced, and that's when things start to go awry on the trail. So that's kind of coasting along, descending. Let's have a look at what's happening in some corners. As we descend down into this right-hand corner, if we lead with our right foot, then we're not really pointing in the right direction with our hips. The corner's going in one direction and our hips are pointing in the opposite. And you're working against yourself, so it's not as fluid. In the next clip, you'll see we come in, and this time we switch the feet out just before the corner to lead with the left foot, so the hips are pointing in the direction that we're taking. You'll see that the crank actually rolls ever so slightly to get pressure in that outer foot, to get some grip. In this third and final run, what we're going to see is we actually fully bottom out and put that outside crank to the bottom. Again, we come in with the left foot lead, setting the hips up to take the corner, and the foot goes down, ready to save the bike as it washes out on this loose over hard surface. Excellent. So moving on from like the classic thing of cornering and what's happening with our cranks in cornering, what's happening with them in drops, and particularly this type of drop here. So we've got a small kind of like rolling rock drop and up and over. And the key with the stuff like this, and we see a lot of pedal scrapes on these features, thinking that people must have their crank timing wrong and they've got their cranks in the wrong position as they come over the top of it. So stuff like this is all about your entrance to it and getting the speed dialed in before you get to it. Anything like a root bed that you're going to have to roll through, series of lumpy rocks, or a rolling rock drop like this, it's what you do before it in the speed that means that you can be running cranks relatively just off level as you get to that feature and as you come over that feature. The footwork's still going to be similar. We're still going to be using that wedge type shape where our lead foot's got a slight heel drop, particularly with this, it's got a lump up onto it. You don't want the foot getting blown off the pedal. You want to be able to push the bike on ahead of you. And that rearward foot, you'll see in the slow-mo that Dan will put in, is going to be probably toe down as we come over this. And that's so that we can stabilize those cranks and not have the cranks rolling around on us as we come over this. As we come into this landing area here, we don't want the crank to rotate. If that goes forward, we're going to come forward into the front center of the bike, and that's going to put our weight in a really unfavorable place on this downslope on the exit. Excellent, so we've just seen that in action, and as you can see, it's all about the footwork and the cranks coming into the fact that I'm pedaling. So you really need to get that speed control set up before this feature. And in the video, you'll see I accelerate into it, and then I'm off the gas and rolling through it. And I want to be off the gas and rolling sooner rather than later. If I'm pedaling up into a feature, be it a rolling rock drop like this, a drop off, a jump face, then I'm not ready. I'm still pedaling. And if I'm just a bit slack with my pedal timing and I stop pedaling in the wrong place, I can be on it when I'm needing to move my body. So it's all done very, very early, and it gives me plenty of time to be ready, looking ahead, looking through the feature, and cranks are in that kind of midpoint, just off level. Something I really advise people not to get into, and you can see here there's beeline options. Perhaps you've gone around the beeline and looked at it and thought, oh man, I want to have a go at that, and you come back up and then you sit on the edge and you do like the kind of teeter-totter with the bike here, thinking, should I roll in, should I not? And then you're trying to get on the pedals as you're rolling in. That's really bad. That's when people come unstuck a lot. So always make sure that you go back a good few bike lengths, give yourself a nice run in, and that you're ready and prepared before you even arrive at it. A good few lengths before you arrive at it at best. This one's a bit tricky with that uphill roll, and you really got to manage that speed and accelerate into it. But you're better to do that a couple of times and think, not yet, stop, go back, try your run up again, than, as I say, balance on the edge and just try to drop in. There's a couple of good ways to think about exactly where your cranks are in that 360-degree revolution, and to really help you start getting your crank positioning like really nice and sweet and also consistent as well. The first one would be the track stand, and the other one would just be setting up a basic slalom and doing what we call cutties in the car park. So you're working that outside foot down, so you're really feeling them cranks on the vertical, or you're just rolling it with cranks just off the level, you know, slightly rolled back there in the 360. And getting your weight transfer through them with them level. So slalom's always a good way to sort of think about your footwork and particularly your crank positioning. Right, some nice slow speed pedaling always helps you think about where your footwork is. And what we'll do is we'll roll to a stop. Little back pedal, doesn't hurt. And now we'll just balance the bike. And you'll feel if you end up getting with that foot down ever so slightly, it starts to get harder to balance. We roll it back. And now we're really into the drive point here before level, and I've got a lot more control there. I can just squeeze the power, roll the bike forward. You could balance that against the brake as well if you wanted, but we've got a slight gradient to play with, and it's always good to do these slightly uphill. So really feeling where the footwork is. If I roll that forward, now the weight becomes unevenly distributed, and the bike's a little bit harder to balance. So I'll roll it back again. Just feel that pressure there. And that's really nice position. You can drop the heel ever so slightly. Back foot's not really doing a lot, to the point that you could probably take it off at that point. There we go, so there's basic track stand. Good for thinking about where the crank is lined up. Let's have a look at some slalom. There we go. So we could spend all day, set up some rocks, jump us a goalpost, put some cones out. Just a basic bit of slalom to give you an idea. The first run, cranks level, and I'd swap my lead foot out so the hips are always turning in, thinking about that footwork element of getting the hips pointing where we want to go. Second run, dropping the outer foot and feeling that the crank's on that vertical. Good weight transfer, good pressure in that outer foot. Remember, it helps counterbalance the lean of the bike, as well as allowing me to push down and get grip in the corner. So that's it for this edition. We hope you enjoyed it. We're going to be exploring more skills and technique in upcoming features. We're going to go back to the start again at some point and revisit all the classics, thinking about our footwork, body position, entry, section, exit, the speed control elements, and of course, wheelie, manual, hop and jump. So stay tuned. Don't forget the back issues, lots of useful stuff on there. Always gets uploaded to YouTube, the videos as well. So do tune in, folks, and we'll see you again next time.